Hi guys, I missed you. And I know you're gonna be like, the hiatus was the episode before this, but that episode was recorded before the hiatus. But welcome to season 2. I hope I sound more energetic than I have towards the last part of season 1 because I have done it. I have figured out the next direction. And essentially, that's what this episode is gonna be. We're laying the carpet into the new room of the podcast. We're telling you a bit about the secret history that I don't think I've shared in the podcast specifically. My bad, y'all. And just like chit chat. I'm so excited, and I'm gonna start. I know in the beginning I love to just chit chat and give y'all like housekeeping. Hi, it's your girl Jamila, and this is Hardship with Ease. I created this podcast because I went through a year of hardship that constantly challenged who I was. I struggle to think about how I go through all these things and how does it affect me as a person, my life, plus all my identities. Whether that's being a Muslim, a woman of color, a middle child, or maybe a recovering perfectionist, recovering overachiever, recovering people pleaser, and recovering a lot of things, but still a crybaby and a judgy bitch. So that's where this podcast came in. Look, I'm not giving y'all advice. I don't have a playbook. I don't think I have the right answers for everybody, but I got the right answers for me. And I used to wish that there was a central place just to have a chance to think about some of these things I was going through and ask questions throughout the journey. And that's why I made this podcast. Whether you're going through a hardship right now, whether you are healing after a hardship, or if you're like me, now you're trying to build, that's where this podcast comes in. This is where we chit chat, where essentially you guys kind of get my day-to-day thought process as I go through different things. And hopefully, at the bare minimum, this will allow us to survive each hardship we go through, or on the brighter side, the main purpose of this podcast at this point, grow into the woman that I want to be, or grow into the person you want to grow into. And yes, it's a we journey right now. It's usually I. Ooh, let's get into it. So, I never really explained why this podcast exists outside of like the tagline, I think, and maybe like sprinkling in random episodes and not making it the main purpose. Like, I'm gonna try to be real about this. This podcast wasn't created because I thought this was a fun thing to do. This podcast was created because, babes, I was struggling. I was torn up. I'm not even gonna lie. I was torn up after my hardships. Like, 2024 was so messy. Like, I had family stuff. The life that I lived was very stable for most of my life, right? And that year, 2024, like, every single thing that was supposed to be stable, essentially, outside of, alhamdulillah, food on the table, roof over my head. I mean, it was always over my head. Everything was like moving around, and I was not built to that. I grew up stable, predictable, I didn't know how to deal with like real issues outside of ignoring them. And basically the hardship wasn't theoretical that year. It wasn't like, oh, this person's a bad friend, well, I'll just stop hanging out with them or do this, that. This was like people, like, this is family. This is like just really in your face. It was lived. This was like workspace as well. And I didn't start recording because I had insight. I didn't even record during the hardship. I started recording because after the hardship, I just felt defeated. I felt so defeated. I felt like I didn't know what to do. And I kept thinking about the ayah, right? Innama yusra yusra, which means with hardship comes ease. I kept thinking like, I wish I could handle hardship then and there. I kept having this idea of waiting for ease to come after. And I was just like, oh my God, babes, like, I wish I learned. And I did learn through that hardship. Like, babes, you can't wait. Because I waited a full year. I waited a full year and months, a couple months too, into it. And after a year, it's kind of insanity to continuously wait for things to get better without having like any part of you in it. So I kind of just said, what if I made a podcast? What if I made a space to talk about these things? Because I was listening to a podcast by another person. I was like, about psychology and growth and all these things and how you can change. And I kept listening to it religiously, like it would save me. And then I got to a point saying like, well, she's not Muslim, she's not black, she's not dealing with things like people can be like, oh, leave your house. That's a lot of things that come after that, like if you decide to run away or whatever it is, or quit that job, right? Girl, there's a lot going on if I don't have a job, like whatever it is. It felt like, babes, but you don't understand my perspective. So what did I say? Like, I gotta do my own perspective. Like, I wish there were spaces like me out there. And honestly, a lot of the Muslim podcasts, I love them. But I think sometimes they focus being a Muslim. This is not a Muslim podcast. This is literally just, I happen to be Muslim. But I wish, like, you know, someone looked like me, talked like me, maybe went through certain things like me, could talk to me. So that's what I did. And also, I gave a lot of advice during that time so much out loud that people kept being like, wow, your advice is really nice. And then I was like, okay, what if I just like podcast this? Mind you, I don't even give people my podcast. That's what gets me. I don't even tell people about the podcast. Okay, like this feels like me in my room just talking to myself. But essentially, Hardship with Ease was really at first asking, how can I stay intact while all of this is happening? And then not even growth. It was just the intention of, babes, can I not go insane? Because I don't even, like, when I made it, I didn't know if the hardship was truly over, which it wasn't necessarily, but a big portion of it was when I started it. So I was just like, I don't know if more things are going to come up and I'm not going to wait. But, like, let's start this now so we're not crazy later on. And in hindsight, season 1 was mostly 2025. Some of the episodes were pre-2025, even though they're posted all in 2025. And I spent months sitting on, like, the podcast. Maybe, like, 3 or 4 months sitting on a bunch of episodes. And I felt like 2025 for me, I came into it being like, this is a year of healing. I don't care. I'm not trying to be productive. I'm not trying to, like, this podcast, I don't expect this to be something I would make money off of, nor would I probably want to. This feels more like a diary almost, a public diary, a vlog per se, even though it's a podcast. And when I was sitting in my year of healing, as I was actually sitting and like growing, not just writing this podcast, but like for the first time reflecting, and I think once again, podcast was always that thing. Things started to change as I kept writing in 2025 during healing. Choices stopped being which one is the right answer, and they started being which one felt right to me. Felt like I could handle what came with it. Thinking was always seen as a problem. You know, I always told myself not to think too much because everyone told me I thought too much. And I thought more in my life than I ever did in 2025. And I was emotionally healed from that, low-key. Like, I don't know how to say it. As thinking was never the problem. Thinking was safety. And season 1 kind of became all about thinking. It was about values, not being bitter, clarity, ambition. Just so many simple things that I feel like we all like throw in the air. And me playing with the friction of it and saying like, okay, well, this is what we might think, but I don't think that. And then being mad about that. And then, you know, everything into it. It was the art of thinking. I really love that episode that somehow said the art, but like it's literally the art of thinking, the art of friction. And it worked. The friction, like it created inner worlds, it created habits, it created systems, structure in my life. Like I started losing weight. And I'll say like right now, when I first started the freaking podcast, guys, I was not losing weight. I know I talk about my diet because that's like one of the easiest things to use as a example, but it made things work. It made it easier to think about being hurt. It made it easier when hardship came in front of me. It didn't even feel like hardship anymore. It felt like with ease, bro. It was internally cohesive, and I didn't feel like I had to have the right answer for those outside of me. I will be honest though, things like money, space, energy, time, when I started to be, I keep using the word greedy, which is probably not the right word, but when I started to want more, when I decided to desire not just the thoughts in my head, right? Not just being able to react to people, but be able to be proactive and build, right? Because I think the first part was being like, oh my God, how can I show people that I don't agree or I don't do this? Like trying to push back against people. And then it started being like, wait, I don't want to spend my whole life like this energy pushing back. I want to actually build. I want to actually have momentum. And that's when the transition began. The podcast really went from that survival mechanism to like growth and all those things. But then it was like, wait, how can I build a world? And that's how season 2 was like breathing down my neck for a while, not realizing what it was. It was just like, I'm unhappy. And I'm not saying unhappy in a way of like, oh my God, my life is bad. I'm irritated. Babes, I'm irritated every day in and out. I couldn't really write episodes well. And I'm not saying that like during the boat hiatus that it was that. It was like after it. I was writing episodes, but I kept being like, it won't be as good as the boat or the balance of ambition or this. Like, it felt like I wasn't fighting concepts anymore. Like, I knew the answer. When I wrote softness, like, I knew the answer. Or is it femininity? I knew the answer. It felt flat. And writing felt flat. And that's why I started doing, like, question and answer. Because it was like, okay, well, I'm not writing. I'm answering in real time. So I guess that's not flat. And season 2 kind of came, like, I thought the episode about the middle, my frustrations, all of that, I was like, oh, this frustration means that this is a new part. I'm just gonna be frustrated. That's so crazy, but I'm just gonna be unhappy with these things. And so when I started writing the concept of season 2, right, even when I said, okay, no, that episode is the end of season 1, I had to like even edit it out. I said, okay, what is season 2? I still wrote season 2 in a way of, I know the question changed. I know very, very well that the question is not a question about my thoughts. It's not a question about nuance and reconciling with, like, am I allowed to think this way? Like, I know I can. I don't care anymore. I will think this way. But I was frustrated. I was like, okay, if I know I can think this way, why are we still frustrated? What is happening? And it's like, oh, it's because of the environment. Maybe it's because of the environment. But I really didn't know. I came to this kind of conclusion. We'll talk a lot more about it. Season 1 was essentially dismantling permission, right, from others. I have the legitimate right to my thought process, and I don't have to, every time I have a thought, check it against multiple sources. People might look at me sometimes and think I'm very impulsive when I'm not. I think very fast and deep. I had to explain that, and I had to say, if I don't like this thing, I would have to give you like a list of why I don't like those things. And I started not doing that anymore. Like when people be like, I'm like, I don't like this. Like, why? I'm like, because I don't like it. Because I could sit here and explain my entire thought process, but oh my God, that's so much work. And I thought, oh, they're not letting me have permission to be me. And I paused and I was like, wait, wasn't I saying that in the beginning of season 1? I was pretending like I needed permission for thought, right? I kind of focus on this idea of permission of thought. This is permission of existing. The legitimacy of being, whether that's visible, public, imperfect, all these things, and kind of shifting from reflecting as we do with thoughts and saying, wait, you can think these things, to not reacting to people, but just being. So a shift from like internal cohesiveness to embodying cohesiveness. Season 1, I think it really just established like, you know, my inner world, authorship over my own thoughts, nuance of self-understanding. And I think there's some episodes that show that really well. There's others that did it okay, but they showed me learning that. And I will never say that these seasons I'm like, oh, and boom, here's exactly how you do those things. These seasons are just me working through it until I get to a point that I'm like, oh my God, wait, I answered the question. I figured it out. And I think I hit that like full stride in season 1. Like, I am not meant to pretend that like all of this internal change is internal and like I ignore everyone else. And I think the middle episode is a great example of me like kind of pushing and pulling against that, of like, am I supposed to just sit here and pretend that I have not changed? Am I supposed to like sit here and answer questions that I don't like anymore and I don't want to answer? Am I supposed to let you talk to me that way anymore? Because I'm gonna beat your ass. Like, and it was definitely frustration of like, yo, I'm gonna beat everybody because I can't say what I want. I can't do what I want. And it was irritating. It was very, very irritating. Luckily, I went on vacation, y'all. And I think that helped in some type of ways. Not like a relaxation, I will say, because it was a group trip. But more like I got to explore. I got to think in a different setting. I got to see myself in a different setting that I haven't seen myself in for a very long time. Let's start with this idea of, we said like season 2 is about how do we take that inner permission and how do we make it external permission. That's a huge concept. That's why it's a season and not an episode. And you could even argue, girl, how did you even claim that you had internal permission? Well, if you watch every episode through, feel free to do that. You can see from like episode 1 to like episode 12, you can see the big difference of how I start to give myself more permission. And so for me, sitting here in season 2, at first, when I started writing this concept of season 2, I asked how I could survive. I was like, how do you survive being visible? How do you survive your identity being outside of yourself now? How do you keep authorship? How do you endure? And let me tell you something. When I was writing that, right, I forgot the whole point of Hardship with Ease is. And I'm bringing this up because I promise it will like connect everything. Hardship with Ease is about thriving more than anything else. It's about growth more than anything else. I know I said at the bare minimum survive a lot in the beginning. I learned throughout season 1 I don't want to survive anymore. I'm tired of surviving. Surviving is not the ease. If you're surviving, it's not easy to survive, and no one can tell me otherwise. You might like to suffer, and I'm not gonna tell you. You can like suffering, but it's not easy to suffer. Okay, that's you. But to thrive, right? Thriving doesn't ask like, how do I endure this? How do I protect this? How do I justify this, right? Especially justification. You know? It's not how do I withstand this? How do I avoid damage? How do I protect? And when I was writing season 2, I had that mindset, that survival mindset, like trying to write the first episode, and even trying to write this episode. And when I say first episode, I mean the second episode, like an actual topic episode. But like when I was trying to write it, I kept having the survival moments, and I was like, I don't understand how I'm supposed to show off surviving, because that's confusing. But Hardship with Ease, like I really do want to say it's about thriving. It's about how do you move as one? How do you act without evacuation? How do you remain internally authored while still being visible? Those questions, I know, very wordy, but the questions of how do I stay sane while now having outside influences touch what I've been building internally. How do I do that? That's a hard question. I don't know how to do that, baby. Like I don't know shit for shit. I didn't know how to build internally. I learned. Now I'm trying to learn, how do I build externally? How do I show up visibly? And how do I do that and thrive? Not necessarily just survive, but like, how do I thrive? And that's kind of like what we're thinking. Like, action is public, right? Thought is private. And my issue was thought was public too, and I learned to make that private. But now action is public. I'm trying to build stuff. I'm trying to build a business on the side. Nothing to do with the podcast, but that's gonna be visible. I've been like hiding myself from it and like terrified for 2026, but I will do it eventually, because we did do this podcast eventually. And so season 2 is not going to exist quietly the way season 1 did. Season 2 is probably going to mention people, and I'm not going to say people's names. I might talk about situations, because visibility introduces interpretation, projection, judgment, contradictions especially. And we worked with contradictions a lot when we talked about thoughts and thinking. We're going to talk about a lot more contradictions, and I'm going to be a very contradictive person. I'm going to be like, yeah, and I cut that person off. Still wish them the best. I literally will make dua for that person all the time, that they get what they want. But also, I might laugh at that person for some of the actions I've seen them do, like when I'm not friends with them anymore, or when I'm not around that person, or things of that nature. And hey, complex human being, but I'm going to admit that straight up on here. I'm not going to, like I said, season 1 was saying, okay, no one can stop my thoughts. Season 2 is like, babes, I'm sorry, I'm not going to say nobody's names. I'm not going to try to make it about I'm right, people are wrong. But it can get very messy. And I'm probably not going to talk about people like that. I'm going to try really hard not to. And at the end of season 1, I came to this like concept that I kept saying, like, oh, as long as I do actions, as long as like my identity, my values, all those things show up in action, then like clearly I have those things. Season 2 is going to play against all of that. It's going to be really focused on this concept of inhabiting. And I would like to say the art of inhabiting, it might be, and I might name this episode that, but that's what this season is really going to focus on, right? Action without like worrying about other people, choice without like having to fully go through the concept of narration of like, is this the right choice? Is this like, I should know by now. Having to be continuously doing things without like being reassured if I'm right or not. Like, thoughts are gentle, action is not. And all of this while remaining like still up there with my identity because we have solidified the identity. I hope we did. We'll find out. We'll find out. But like thinking that I have solidified my thought process and identity, now I have new friction, outside friction. How am I dealing with outside friction? Yay. I feel like I'm repeating a lot of the same things, guys, but I do think it's kind of a complex way to explain what a season's going to be about. And I don't think I've seen anyone personally, because I also don't listen to podcasts, truth be told. I'm sorry. Most podcasts are bad. And every time I try, there's like one podcast right now that's hanging on by a thread that I can kind of listen to. And we're going to take like this concept, this framework of like inhabiting, and we're going to push it against topics that I didn't talk about in season 1. I didn't talk about like work. I didn't talk about like self-love, friendship, activity. We might circle the block back to ambition, work, money. I didn't talk about those things. But like a lot of these things are outside of yourself. Tit for tat, I did quit the job that really was, I was getting workplace bullied, y'all. While my hardship with my family is happening at the same time. So I think there are so many great topics that can come out of that. I just didn't think thinking was like the place to do it. And now that we're talking about things outside of thinking, we can have that nuance. And so we're gonna kind of play around. Like, I also will sit here and say, like, I'm not gonna promise that I'm gonna be the greatest person ever. I'm not gonna promise growth is always up. Sometimes we hit the floor and stand back up. And I do that a lot. I was just really good with thinking, not making that a big deal. But I know with action, unfortunately, y'all are going to see more mistakes and dumb decisions and dumb thought processes. And I'm gonna just have to deal with that, right? And I can't be likable. I think you're going to see a lot more of my unlikable personality. Or I'll say less caring about being liked. I don't care if I'm liked at this point. This is my podcast. Yes. See, season 1 did work. Thinking did work. Instead, like, we're always going to play with friction. We're always going to look at like ownership about actions and authorship of like who decides who I am and all these things. And just like, how do you embody some of these like values and lessons and all these things? And I think it's going to be really, really fun. And I'll give a sneak peek of the next episode. And I always am very hesitant to say things, but I have this written out. So like, I have the entire script written out and I could literally record it tonight. I'm not going to, but I'm just saying it. Next episode is going to be on like self, not identity, something that has to do with self. And then like, I think it's a great framework. Ew, I sound like a classroom. I thought I said this was not like teaching. But I'm going to play with this idea of self-love. And we're going to see if that concept embodies what we discuss the hope for season 2 to be. Also, these are all hopes. I will say, I'm a human being. I might stray very far from what I thought the season would be about. But I do think I sat here and thought a lot about like what I wanted the season to do. And I ran through multiple versions of this first episode because I didn't even understand what I was trying to do. And let's just say this is the first baby step. I have no idea what the art of inhabiting actually looks like. I don't know if we'll crash and burn. But I think that's the fun part. It's not a system. It's not a vice. It's literally me, my real life, and me going through these lessons, babes. Like, it's just a record of my life. It's literally lived decisions. And yeah. We're building. I think the biggest thing is we're building this year, 2020. I am so excited. And I would love to see what other people are building. I would love to know what other things people are excited about. And yeah, thank you guys so much. I know this episode might have been a little of a lot. But if you could walk away, three things only. We finished the art of thinking and we don't really try to justify ourselves anymore or give ourselves permission. Now we are trying to stop ourselves from begging for permission to be, because we shall inhabit, and this is the art of inhabiting life. And although this is not hardships per se, I do think growth has its hardships. I think there will be moments and times and situations. We're not going to go in depth to those, but I think there'll be ways to handle growth with ease. Bye!